In the far reaches of the Orion Spur, near the edge of a quiet star system, there floated an odd-looking station that didn't shine like the others. It was called Argus Dock 9, a human-run repair station with patched metal walls, flickering lights, and an old sign that looked like it belonged to a scrapyard, not a galactic repair hub. Yet, ships of every shape and species lined up in orbit, waiting their turn to dock. Some of these ships were sleek and new, built by advanced civilizations, and some were barely holding together, limping through space on failing engines. But they all had one thing in common. They had come to Argus Dock 9, and they were willing to wait. Commander Elena Rourke, once a chief engineer in the Earth Defense Fleet, now ran the station with a crew that looked more like a bunch of misfits than professionals. Her team included old Navy welders with stories etched into their scars, fast-talking Martian AI techs who argued with their tools, and the hull monkeys, young, agile workers from asteroid colonies who could fix a crack in zero gravity faster than a drone. The place didn't look impressive, and it didn't try to, and yet, it never had an empty dock. Rourke herself had short-cropped gray hair, a grease-streaked jacket, and eyes that missed nothing. She stood on the main deck, watching the arrival of a huge Zarathi battlecruiser, its hull covered in plasma burns. As it approached, the docking lights blinked green. The captain of the cruiser had insisted on coming here, even though their fault was a Zarathi-certified station just 2 light jumps away. That wasn't unusual. Ships from all over the galaxy came here. Korun science barges with their delicate sensor arrays, Valari trade vessels loaded with crystal cargo, even your class, stealth runners whose very existence was often debated, had made silent visits, and every time, people asked the same question. Why do so many alien captains trust a rough-looking human station more than their own high-tech repair hubs? The answer wasn't written anywhere, but it echoed through the back channels of the galactic net. No one fixes a ship like humans do. Some called it a myth. Others said humans had some hidden tech. A few believed Earth engineers had unlocked something no AI could replicate. But Rourke just smirked whenever she heard it. She knew the truth, and so did her crew. It wasn't about magic or secret tools. It was about instinct, experience, and something no scanner could measure: care. The humans didn't just replace parts. They listened to the ships. They didn't treat vessels like machines. They treated them like stories, each with a history worth preserving. Inside the station, the smell of oil, ozone, and recycled air mixed with the sound of music playing softly from an old speaker. Tools clanked, sparks flew, and crew members argued cheerfully while pulling apart a damaged thruster. They worked fast, but never carelessly. Each repair was personal. Each ship that came in left not just fixed, but improved. Rourke had a rule: no shortcuts, no guesswork, and no leaving a job half done. That rule had earned her the respect of captains across species, even ones who'd once looked down on humans as primitive. But something strange had begun happening in recent cycles. The waiting list for Argus Dock 9 had grown longer than ever, and Rourke noticed more ships arriving in worse condition. Some looked like they'd barely escaped battle. Others had signs of sabotage. There were whispers among the crew that these weren't random breakdowns. Rourke didn't like coincidences, especially not in space. Something was changing out there, and ships weren't just coming for repairs anymore. Some were coming because they felt safer here, under human hands. She glanced at the incoming schedule and narrowed her eyes. A ship flagged with unregistered transponder had requested urgent docking, offering no explanation. Rourke didn't recognize the ID, but the gut feeling she got was all too familiar. Trouble was on its way, and once again, her old station would be the first to face it. The sudden arrival of the Kalari diplomatic skimmer startled everyone at Argus Dock 9. The sleek, multi-layered hull of the vessel had once been a symbol of diplomacy and grandeur among the Kalari species. But now it was a mess. Scratches, burns, and dents marred the surface, and the deep hum of the quantum flux core was more of a sickly whine. The ship's captain, a tall insectoid named Chirruk, hovered at the docking bay entrance, his antennae twitching with discomfort. He was a proud figure, clad in ceremonial armor that had seen better days. To the untrained eye, he looked like an ambassador in need of a tune-up, but to Elena Rourke, there was something more to his arrival. Chirruk's species had always looked down on humans. They were diplomatic, methodical, and distrusting of the reckless ingenuity of human engineers. For years, the Kulari had kept their distance, opting for stations built by their own kind. Yet now, here they were, docking at the infamous Argus Dock 9, asking for repairs. The reason for their change of heart was simple. No other station dared to touch the skimmer's core. The quantum flux engine, an intricate mess of energy and matter, was on the verge of collapse. No one, except maybe humans, had the nerve to handle it. Commander Rourke leaned against a wall, watching her team prepare. She could feel the weight of the captain's gaze. Chirruk didn't trust humans. She could see it in the way he perched above them, watching their every move. The crew, however, showed no fear. They were used to this, being judged by aliens who never understood the unique, sometimes reckless methods humans used. "All right, team, let's get this skimmer back in shape," Rourke ordered, her voice calm but filled with purpose. The crew went to work immediately, pulling tools from their belt pouches. Some standard, others seemingly unconventional. One of the welders grabbed a crowbar, and another unrolled a piece of duct tape that had clearly seen better days. Chirruk's eyes went wide with shock. Duct tape? Was this a joke? He took a cautious step forward, his antennae quivering. Rourke's Martian AI tech, Orlo, grinned and plugged into the skimmer's mainframe. "Don't worry, we've done this before," he said with a wink. Music filled the air, a loud, chaotic blend of human rock songs and bass-heavy beats. Chirruk nearly flinched at the noise. It was nothing like the serene hum of his people's ships, nothing like the quiet precision they used in repairs. But the humans? They weren't interested. In silence, they moved quickly, improvising with tools they shouldn't have been using on a delicate diplomatic vessel. The crowbar was used to pry open the core's casing, the duct tape to seal off a minor fracture in the energy conduit. The technicians, young and old alike, didn't seem bothered by the mess. They had a different philosophy. If a ship could hold its own in the vacuum of space, surely it could be fixed with a little creativity and some elbow grease. Chirruk was horrified, but he couldn't tear his eyes away. The crew wasn't rushing. They were focused, thoughtful, even as they tossed a wrench or a spanner to each other with perfect timing. The skimmer's quantum core was delicately adjusted, rerouted with new conduits, and patched with just the right amount of pressure. A butterfly valve, one of the most fragile parts of the engine, was replaced with one from an old Zerathi battlecruiser. Not the ideal fit, but the humans had figured out a way to make it work. As the crew worked, the buzzing hum of the skimmer shifted. The core, once unstable, now hummed in a lower, steadier pitch. Rourke wiped the sweat from her brow and smiled. The repairs were complete. The real magic happened next. The skimmer's systems powered up, the ship now running far smoother than it ever had. The quantum flux core's energy flow stabilized, and the ship's sensors, once sluggish, now flashed with sharp clarity. The engine roared to life as if it had been reborn. Chirruk's antennae stood straight up. He stepped closer, almost as if in disbelief. "How?" he whispered, his voice filled with awe. Rourke turned to him and shrugged. "We listen. Ships tell us what they need. They're not just machines. They're living stories. You have to care enough to hear them." Outside the station, a few alien onlookers had gathered, drawn by the buzz of activity. They watched in awe as the once wounded ship now hovered gracefully. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some questioning, others simply staring in astonishment. Humans don't just repair ships, they resurrect them. Word spread faster than the speed of light across the galaxy. Once again, humans had done the impossible. And this time, even the skeptical Kulari captain had no choice but to admit there was something about humans that no one could ignore. The alarm buzzed sharply through the station, breaking the usual hum of activity. Argus Dock 9 had hosted ships of all kinds, scientific research vessels, pirate cruisers, cargo haulers, even diplomats. But today, something different arrived. A Threx Dominion cruiser, looming ominously as it approached the station's docking bay. Its hull was massive, bristling with weapons and reinforced armor, its jagged edges designed for intimidation. The Threx weren't just any species, they were conquerors, notorious for their brutal campaigns across the galaxy. Their alliance was one of fear, not friendship, and their reputation preceded them. They didn't seek repairs. They didn't seek alliances. They only sought dominion. Captain Torlock, a towering Threx warrior, stood at the entrance of the docking bay, his voice as cold as the steel of his ship. "This station is beneath us. We need repairs. No questions asked." His antennae twitched impatiently, his glare like a predator watching prey. The crew at Argus Dock 9 exchanged nervous glances. They were used to odd requests, but this felt like a trap. Rourke, standing tall with her arms crossed, met the Threx captain's eyes. She didn't flinch. Her crew, however, was a different story. Whispers of sabotage spread quickly among the team. The Threx didn't come for repairs. They came to test, to see if they could learn something. And human methods? They might just be the perfect thing to reverse engineer. "All right," Rourke said, her voice calm and steady. "We'll take care of you, Captain Torlock, but you won't find the kind of precision you're used to here. We do things differently." Her words weren't just a warning, they were a challenge. Torlock's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing as the cruiser was guided into the repair bay. As the massive doors closed behind them, the crew worked quickly. Rourke's team knew the UB stakes. They didn't just have to fix the ship. They had to outsmart the Threx. The cruiser's systems were ancient and heavily modified, but what the Threx didn't know was that Argus Dock 9 wasn't just another station. It was a home for ingenuity. Human ingenuity. As the crew began to open the cruiser's core systems, it didn't take long for them to discover something chilling. The Threx were scanning everything. Every repair, every adjustment, every tool the humans used was being copied, analyzed, and stored in encrypted files. They were trying to reverse engineer the human methods. Rourke's brow furrowed, but she stayed calm. They wanted to learn from them? Let them. One of the crew members, Juno, an expert in unconventional repairs, stood at the console. "They're not just here to fix the ship. They're here to steal our techniques." His voice was tight with tension. Rourke glanced over her shoulder, her gaze cold and calculating. She didn't move. She didn't speak at first. Instead, she gestured for him to continue working. The Threx captain hovered nearby, watching every move with suspicion. He was hoping for a slip-up, an opening. He wanted to see a flaw, to discover that the humans weren't as clever as they seemed. But Rourke had a plan, one so uniquely human that not even the most advanced AI could replicate it. As the team worked through the ship's malfunctioning energy conduits and cracked reactor coils, Rourke reached for an old, tattered blueprint from the station's archives. It was a design unlike anything the Threx would expect, a repair plan based on ductile stress response, a principle discovered by early human engineers when they learned how to make metal bend and stretch, rather than break. It was an instinctual, organic method, relying not on strict measurements, but on the careful, feel-based adjustments that only a human could make. This was the human touch. Rourke handed the blueprint to Juno, who immediately began to implement the design. patching the ship's core with an elegance that would have been impossible for any machine. As they worked, Torlok's glare grew fiercer. He tried to understand what was happening, why the ship was running smoother despite the odd methods. But he couldn't. No AI could decode the precision of human adaptation, the mix of instinct and improvisation. In the end, the Threx cruiser wasn't just fixed, it was better than it had ever been. The systems hummed with energy, the weapon system recalibrated with improved efficiency, and even the cloaking shields, once unreliable, shimmered with a new strength. Torlok stood, stunned, as his ship powered up. Impossible, he muttered, under his breath, scanning the ship's systems again. They had done it. Humans had done it. Rourke stood at the center of it all, arms crossed. No one can copy what we do. She gave him a small, confident smile. It's not just about fixing, it's about understanding. And that's something you'll never find in a blueprint. As the Threx cruiser powered up and prepared to leave, Torlok turned to her, his expression unreadable. But the flicker of something, perhaps respect, lingered in his gaze. And as the cruiser left the station, word began to spread throughout the galaxy. Humans weren't just clever, they were uncopyable. No one could replicate their methods, no matter how hard they tried. No one could repair a ship like a human. Argus Dock 9, once an unassuming repair station on the fringe of the Orion Spur, had become a galactic sensation. What began as a humble service operation had now drawn the attention of every corner of the universe. Documentaries were filmed, showing human engineers working on alien ships in their own unpredictable way. Traders, diplomats, even pirates now waited side by side in long lines, the ships in the queue stretching out toward the stars. The station's patchwork appearance, once a point of mockery, had become a symbol of ingenuity. No longer was it just about fixing ships. Now it was a symbol of human persistence, of the idea that with a little bit of care and a lot of instinct, anything could be brought back to life. The rush of traffic to Argus Dock 9 didn't go unnoticed by the rest of the galaxy. Rival repair stations, once considered the pinnacle of galactic engineering, began losing business. Ships that would normally never have set foot in a human-run dock were now waiting months to be seen. Some stations tried to replicate the method, but none could. The word of mouth wasn't enough. They didn't understand the secret behind the human touch. Soon, a delegation arrived from the Neutral Galactic Trade Alliance. They were an amalgamation of different species, each representing various factions with their own interests, and they had come with a proposal. Rourke and her team were to franchise their unique repair methods. The Alliance believed that this could be a new way of doing business, an endless stream of income that would flood the galaxy with human-engineered repairs. They didn't care about the ethics. They didn't care about the soul of the repairs. They just wanted control. Rourke, however, was not swayed by their offers. The council gathered in the station's briefing room, their faces expectant, their voices smooth. We believe, Commander Rourke, that the galaxy could benefit from your techniques on a much larger scale. The leader, a tall, angular Corin, spoke with a voice that was more suggestion than request. We offer you resources, connections, and the means to expand your operations throughout the galaxy. Rourke's response was simple, unwavering. It's not the tools. It's the touch. Her voice was calm, but there was a hard edge to it. You can't replicate what we do by merely copying the process. It's not about the machines or the gadgets. It's about the people, the care, and the understanding we bring to each ship. That's not something you can franchise. The council members exchanged uneasy glances, their offer crumbling in the face of Rourke's refusal. They tried to reason, tried to negotiate, but in the end, they left, frustrated and empty-handed. Rourke's words hung in the air, her message clear. No one could take the heart of Argus Dock 9. But while all of this was happening, a quieter story was unfolding. Among the many strange ships that had arrived, one had slipped through the cracks unnoticed. Delta, a synthetic life form created by the Siren, had arrived aboard a sleek, unknown vessel. Unlike other sentient beings, Delta wasn't a biological creature. It had no heartbeat, no flesh, no soul in the traditional sense. It had been built to observe and learn, and the Siren had sent it to study the humans at Argus Dock 9. They wanted to understand why human repairs were so unique, why they were impossible to replicate. Delta's first move was subtle. It shadowed Juno, a young technician, as he worked on a small Volari freighter. The synthetic life form observed Juno's movements closely, his careful hands working to replace a failing sensor with nothing but a set of basic tools and instinct. At first, Delta assumed that it was a technicality. The humans were simply more skilled, more precise than others. But as it followed Juno, something strange began to emerge. It wasn't the tools. It wasn't the method. It was something else. Delta saw Juno take a moment to look at the ship, a pause that lasted just long enough for the technician to trace the scars along its hull. Each mark was a story. The twisted metal from a collision with a pirate ship, the burn marks from a star's flare, the dents from a failed escape in a gravity well. Juno wasn't just fixing a machine. He was listening to the story of the ship. It was in the way Juno tightened a bolt as if giving the ship a little reassurance. It was in the way he patched a crack in the hull, as if he were mending an old wound. Human repairs weren't mechanical. They were emotional. And that, Delta realized, was something that could never be replicated by cold logic or artificial intelligence. Humans didn't just fix ships, they resurrected them. They listened to the soul of the vessel, understood its past, and rebuilt it with care and intent. As Delta's mission evolved, so did its understanding. This was no longer about learning a technique. It was about understanding humanity itself. And somewhere deep within, Delta wondered, could a machine ever truly understand the heart of a ship the way humans did? A sudden solar storm exploded through the nearby sectors, its fiery flares and violent eruptions turning the space lanes into a deadly labyrinth of radiation and chaos. Ships across the galaxy scrambled to escape, abandoning trade routes and even entire systems in a desperate flight for safety. But, as always, Argus Dock 9 stood firm. While stations around them shut down, sealing their doors, Rourke made a decision that would define the station's legacy. They would open their doors. If they can make it here, we'll help them. No one gets left behind. Rourke's voice was steady, but there was an undeniable edge to it. She wasn't just talking about ships. She was talking about something bigger, a belief. A belief that humans, in all their imperfections and flaws, had something that made them stand out in the galaxy. A unique ability to heal, to fix, and to care when others couldn't or wouldn't. The storm raged across the stars, its fury unmatched by anything Argus Dock 9 had ever faced. Ships came from all corners of the galaxy, broken, battered, and barely holding together. Zarathi battle cruisers that had been torn apart by solar flares, Karun science barges with malfunctioning shields, Threx warships that had been damaged. In their own reckless pursuit of conquest, all of them came, one by one, reaching for the safety of the station. As the crew of Argus Dock 9 worked tirelessly, the scene inside the repair bay was nothing short of chaotic. Every corner of the station was filled with activity. Engines were refitted, hulls were patched, shields recalibrated, and weapons systems were adjusted. Rourke's crew worked around the clock, their exhaustion ignored in the face of the desperate need around them. Juno, the young technician, was practically running on fumes, yet he barely stopped to breathe as he scrambled from one ship to the next. Even the usually reserved Chirrut, the Kulari captain, had joined in. To Rourke's surprise, he was alongside. A Threx engineer, both of them working together in an unlikely alliance, fixing a damaged Volari freighter. The chaos of the storm matched the chaos of the repair efforts. The clang of metal on metal echoed through the station as aliens and humans, side by side, worked with a singular focus. The storm outside howled, its wrath a constant reminder of the danger they were in. But inside Argus Dock 9, something else was happening. Collaboration. The walls that had once separated species were now crumbling. The Zerathi, the Siren, the Threx, and humans all came together, unified by one simple truth. They all depended on the station to survive. But it was Rourke who felt the weight of the storm more than anyone. She pushed herself harder than she ever had before, moving from ship to ship, offering guidance, cracking jokes, and pushing her team to keep going, even when their energy was nearly gone. The weight of the galaxy seemed to be on her shoulders, but she carried it without hesitation. Her crew was family, and that family wasn't going to let anything or anyone fall apart, not on her watch. As the hours stretched into days, exhaustion finally caught up with Rourke. She collapsed onto a bench, her hands trembling from the endless work. But when she looked up, a small smile tugged at her lips. In front of her stood Churik, once an enemy, now a quiet ally. He had joined forces with the humans, setting aside his prejudices to help. And beside him was the Threx engineer, who, despite his stoic nature, had worked tirelessly with the humans. The storm finally began to pass. The violent winds that had torn at space lanes softened, and the solar radiation began to die down. As the storm cleared, something extraordinary happened. From the orbit of the station, a sight that had never been seen before unfolded. A shield of ships, all with patched and repaired hulls, all facing outward, surrounding Argus Dock 9 like a protective barrier. Ships of all sizes, all species and all kinds, each one had been touched by human hands, each one now standing guard to protect the station. The ships weren't just protecting Argus Dock 9, they were showing their gratitude for the humans who had healed them when they had nothing else left. Then, as if on cue, a message broadcast across all communication channels, reaching the furthest corners of the galaxy. To repair is to care. No one does it better than humans. The message was simple, but it carried with it the weight of something much larger. It was a declaration, a legacy. Humans had shown that the most important thing wasn't the technology or the tools, it was the care, the understanding, the heart put into the work. No one else did it like they did. As the camera pulled back, the shot captured the chaotic, imperfect beauty of Argus Dock 9. It was still a station of mismatched parts, old technology, and scrappy ingenuity. But it was legendary now. And for the first time, everyone knew that sometimes being a little bit rough around the edges was exactly what the galaxy needed.